Alrighty, welcome folks. Hello Astrid, hello Jonas. Sorry about the later start. I tried to start early, but didn't work out today, or at least earlier. Let's see, let me push the right button here. That looks right. Alright, welcome folks. This is episode 4 or 5. Already I've lost count. So one thing I've been doing is uploading all the videos to YouTube. Unlike previous series where I've failed to do that when I'm streaming only on Twitch, I'm trying to do that for this one and then sort of catch up on other stuff. It just takes so long to upload. Takes so long to upload and then for it to process it. So it's like I can only get 2 a day. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see, let's go here. There we go. Yeah, so if you're subscribing or getting notifications, you'll get notified. So there is a playlist. Let me go dig out the link for that. That's not it. That's not it. That's it. So let's go. Nope, that's not it. Oh, good. Yeah. So that's my intent is, especially for this series, because I'm kind of, this is more a play, a little bit of play than work. Ensembler I enjoyed, but it was a bit more sort of work oriented, so this is more fun. Why is my cursor not working? Playlists, and there it is. All right. And eventually I'll get StreamYard to be able to work properly with my OBS setup. We'll see how that goes. I'm trying to get it so that I can multi-stream to both like I do when I pair with Mike, but doing it through OBS, which is what I use for this layout and so on, doesn't quite work as well. So that's what I want to do. Okay. All right. So let's see where we left off. Let's go to here. And TDD game. Ta-da! So for those of you who are joining fresh, this is the game I'm working on, and basically when I have a few moments of downtime, I basically try and juggle this layout. Still feel like I have a few more juggling to go, but it's got just about all the information that I need. One thing I realized is when I was doing the risk and commit tracker layout is, oh, I guess you probably want to know that for the other players. And I'm like, oh, so all right, I guess I've got room here underneath to display that. So I'll have to add that to my mock-up. What else has changed? That's pretty much it. I haven't 100% decided whether I want these sort of as visual indicators, which I do like. So saying that, I think I'll probably keep them as visual indicators, but of course, as in everything else, that's not where we're going to start. Where we're going to start, so my goal, my sort of my near-term goal is to get a playable version of this game. In that it doesn't have to look good, Doesn't have to have the graphics, although those are fairly straightforward because they're just images, so that I can play it remotely. That's my number one thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'll play around with some variations on this. I certainly over here I might just have a number. Otherwise it might get too hard to see for individual players what they're, and really that's all I care about. We'll see. I might display both number and sort of stuff like that. But that's a bit of bike shedding. We're nowhere near ready to do that. So where are we? Right. So when we had left off last time, I had remembered, oh yeah, I want to do event sourcing for the game. So now it is event sourced. So one of the key aspects of event sourcing is commands don't change state directly. Commands generate events, and then playing events changes state. So let's see. So we did all the event source aggregate stuff. I basically went quickly with that because I stole a bunch of the stuff from the blackjack game that we did event sourcing on in an ensemble that I run, and realized that this command method, this join method, so command methods, as a reminder, are things that request change in state. And according to command query separation from Birch and Meyer, and I talked a bunch about this last time, you generally don't want commands returning values because it makes it hard to get at that value later. Like, how would I get this player if I didn't happen to save it? How do I get it back? How do I retry things? All sorts of things like that. So what we want is actually to provide a method that returns a player based on a person ID. So in order to do that, let's see how we are in our tests. So it looks like all our tests are passing. We've got 2 disabled tests. That one we might be able to enable. This one, not yet. So let's, before we fix the join thing, let's just see if we can get this test to pass. So GameView loader. Event sourcing is not done, because we need the read model. So one of the things about event sourcing is with typical state-sourced or state-based storage, you store an object and you retrieve that same object and you can view it. So if I stored a game in the database as an object with the values in a table row, then I could easily query that. But since we're storing events, you have to basically play back all the events to find the current state. Now, we'll probably do that using the same model to start with, but eventually we'll want to separate our read model from our what's called the write model. Not as in right and wrong, but as in the state change model. But I think we're going to defer this until this is complete. So let's go back here. And so we're using this join method in not too many places. We're using it in a couple of tests. Those are going to be straightforward. Those don't use the return values. The only one that actually uses the return value of join is, well, besides the production code itself, is this one. Except even here, we don't pay attention to the return value. So what if so who actually is holding on to the return value? Here. All right, so then here, these tests are going to have to change. Actually, no, these won't have to change. This is playing an So one of the things I'm doing in this project is trying to use names that are not with the typical suffixes. So this is actually an application service or a use case, but it can be hard to tell what it is by just looking at it. What was the awe? So do I want to include some lightweight annotations on this? So I have been thinking about including J molecules. And this is, oh, no application. Yeah. No service manager impulse stuff. So the J molecules DDD has, so the architecture has the layering things. I don't think I want to do that yet. But the DDD stuff, yeah, it has the entity, value object, repository. So let's see. So it's got the identifier aggregate stuff, which I do want to add, but not yet. Does this have application service? It's really interesting because like I use a layered hexagonal, which isn't true hexagonal. So it's a bit different. So let's go look. What are the annotations here? They're not types because all the types are around identifier aggregate stuff. We'll get to that. Does have service. And so that'll just be an annotation, right? Yeah, I basically just call it testable architecture because that's what it is. But it's not as, I don't know, doesn't evoke the same kind of things. So what's interesting is this service identifies a domain service. What I really want is in the application layer, I want a use case, because so it's not a service because it's not a domain service. And the reason why is domain-driven design doesn't really talk about that. I might have to talk to Oliver about this because I'm curious what his thinking on that. Yeah, I don't. Honestly, I'm a bit. So Alistair Coburn came out with a book on hexagonal architecture that he self-published, which I basically bought, but I have not looked at yet. So I don't know if he talks about the options for what to put inside the hexagon. In his original write-up, he basically just says application goes here. But for me, it totally makes sense to layer it as domain and application layers as separate things. So if I go to the architecture, though, I kind of have, it's unfortunate that I kind of have to pick from one of these, and none of these actually fit, because it's not really CQRS, and it's not really Hexagon, as we just said. There's sort of Onion, which has two modes, but even there, like, there's application, domain, and infrastructure. So here, application and domain are separate, but in Hexagonal, there's just application with no domain. CQR hex, yes. This pretty much is going to be CQR hex. Yeah, so I might have to. I might end up working this project and creating my testable architecture, because I don't use primary ports. So that's the other difference. I don't name them explicitly as primary ports, although I guess this use case is the primary port, but I find that confusing. All right, I feel like I'm bike shitting now. So my main thing was to say this is application use case. It is basically an inbound port, but it is a class. But it's also very command oriented. So CQR hex might be the right name for this. Anyway, at the application layer, so we talked about command query separation. I find that it mainly applies to things that have state. If it doesn't have state, those rules don't apply. So all this is to say that, you know, my main intent in saying that this is application use case is that I am allowed to return an object from this method. So game itself should not must not, but should not. But this absolutely can return an object because there's no state in this class. It might have dependencies, but there's no domain state. So can return value and query separation doesn't apply here. So what I can do then is I can split this method into two pieces, or sorry, split this. So instead of returning this directly, because I can't do that, I basically want to do something like call this and then return something like game players dot, and I'll refactor this. But players dot, what is it? Not filter. We want I guess we'll stream find first well, that won't work because we're just doing a find first. Right, find first basically returns the first element of the stream, but we got to narrow down the stream first. So if I do this, this is not a refactoring because I will likely have broken something. I'm going to run all the tests because they're still pretty quick. So I certainly expect something to break. Yes. All right. So what I want to do is filter. And what I'm filtering on is that's not person. Why isn't IntelliJ showing me? What's the type of this? Oops. That's parameter info, type info, context info. What is the type that this is? What is the type of players? Players is a list of player. Okay. So this is a player. Thank you. I don't know where my inline hints are for stream. And we want to keep where person ID equals person ID. That's what we want. I don't know where my inline hints are. Hold on a second. This is really annoying. So that's inlay hints, but I want it on the method chains. I don't know why I had that turned off. There we go. Xproof. Do API requests and database entities end up getting converted to domain objects in my app? Yes. Otherwise, I don't have a domain. If your app is taking API requests and or writing to a database and you have behavior, you must be converting and transforming those domain objects to and from what I call sort of generally edge objects. Your database objects, your front end or API DTOs, those all need to be converted into value and domain objects. That provides decoupling, which is important. Okay. So we got our players. This is terrible, of course. This is feature envy, but that's fine. We're in sort of refactor mode of focusing on fixing this method. So that all works. Then we should be able to go here and change signature. Excellent. So I don't need this anymore. So this should still be the same. And it is. So we can take out these comments. We'll do commit. Xproof asks, how do I deal with breaking changes? Can you define what you mean by a breaking change? All right, so now the caller is still ugly. So let's clean that up. So what we want to do is Let's refactor this to a method, which is player 4. We don't want to declare this static. That's fine. And now we can, we don't want to do the get, but we'll write some tests for that. So we're going to move this to game. So move instance method. And so now what we have is we have what is a fairly typical sequence of methods in our application use case methods, which is perform a state changing command and then do a query against the object. So here we're saying join, and then we're saying, can you tell me what the player is for that person? Technically, though, we shouldn't be asking for person. We should be asking for the person's ID. So let's pull this out into the parameter and run our tests. So expert says your API has a new required field and there's no default value. Who's requiring that field? Is the server saying, hey, clients, I need you to pass me a new field? Or are clients saying, hey, I need to give you this? So I don't like breaking changes because clients then get into trouble. This is where if you have to do that, you may have to. So if you own the client, then that's fine. Then it's a new feature. And you do what you do when you do new features, which is test drive it outside in. So the real question is what do you do with the client? If you don't own the client, then you're going to have to provide backward compatible API methods and version your APIs. So I guess the short answer is this is not an architecture problem. This is how do you implement new features, right? So saying that the server, there are requirements that require a new field, that's a new requirement. What do you do when you do new requirements? You start with a failing test. So your failing test is I'm passing in this field, and I should be able to observe that that field is does something to your system. Maybe it just is stored and I should be able to find it. That test will fail. And then you basically implement it throughout your system. Yeah, so these are all questions about API and backwards compatibility and deprecation and migration and all these kinds of things. The architecture doesn't have an opinion on that. What it does allow you to do, because you've got your DTOs separate from your domain objects, is it does make it in some cases easier, because you would have the DTO for your old API and that remains, and then you have your DTO for your new API and that you upgrade. But as you said, if it literally is a new requirement, then you can't do that. But you can always do that. That's a business decision, not a technical decision. So somebody saying X is now required, there is no default, they have to understand the impacts that that's going to have on whatever clients are out there. And again, that depends on, do you control the clients or are these outside your control? And by you, I mean you and your team in your code base. Okay, so what we'd like to do, let's actually finish this refactor. So this is, oops, that's not it. This is, commit this. So refactor moved player 4 to game. All right. So now on game, we should have a test that when a player joins, we can find them. We can because I'd like to simplify this. This seems really unnecessary because we literally have a player map. So let's do that. So events project state. So that's new game, player join, results, and player added to game. I think we can also then assert that game.player4 that returns the player do I care about the contents of the player? No, I just care about the player, its person ID is equal to that. So this should pass. Because it's just adding an assertion onto one we sort of already have. So now what I should be able to do is say, instead of all this, player map get person ID. Excellent. So xproof asks, for breaking changes, any concerns that the domain objects can be in a weird state? API requests and database entities get converted to domain objects. So when you receive an API request and convert it to a domain object, the domain object will have the new field. When you fetch from the database, it may not have that field. Well, don't do that. You got to migrate your database as well. That's part of that change. So again, there's no getting away from that. So even if you didn't convert stuff to domain objects, adding it to an object that is shared by the API in the database, you're still going to have to migrate your database. So you're not in any different shape. It just means that you can more easily do one without the other. So for example, if there is a good default, you might be able to read in a domain object and have that field filled in with the default if it's not available. But if it's truly required, like you propose, you got to migrate your database. What do you do with all the ones that didn't have that value? That's why I think this idea of a required field that has no default brings up the question of, then what do you do about all those objects that didn't have that value? There must actually be a default, unless you're calculating it from something else, or you need it from something else and you're going to slowly migrate. It's not an easy issue, but the business is the one that's making the decision, because what field is now required that wasn't required before? Do you then version your objects themselves? So migrate depends. By migrate, I mean update your database schema so that it's now compatible with whatever you need, but somewhere you're going to need that data. It's actually not a hard problem. It's a well-known, well-understood problem. What makes it hard is the business doesn't like to make those decisions because they may not understand the impact. So if we said, we're going to now require passport identifiers for these people, it's like, okay, what do we put in for all those people for whom we didn't ask that information? Right? I mean, that's a business, because what you don't want to do is have to version your database. And by the way, this is where event sourcing can sometimes be helpful. This is a business, so I want to reiterate, this is not a technical decision. This is not a technical problem. This is a business problem. They have to understand the trade-offs of doing it one way or the other. And often we're not, as developers, not often good at expressing that, but this is literally a business decision. They have added a new requirement. Okay, I've got 500,000 entries in the database that don't have this value. What should I set for that? And they have to have an answer. They can't leave it up to you because it's not a technical decision. And there are lots of decisions like this that developers make assumptions. Null might totally be valid. It might totally be valid. I probably want something else, but null is totally valid. I might want an actual representation of that. But databases are great at handling nulls. The rest of the system, not so much. Somewhere that null, I would hope, gets translated into something more useful. It may be that you have, to use like my random passport ID thing, it may have a passport number that is well defined as being, we don't actually have one. But again, totally a business decision. And if the business is not willing to make that decision, then we developers will say, okay, if you're not willing to make that decision, we're going to do what's easy for us. And then you tell them what the repercussions are. I would not actually use null. I mean, it can handle it, but I would not use null. Because now you have to have, well, what does that mean inside of your domain? The last thing you want are sort of null checks all over the place, right? That's been there, done that. You want some value that is interpreted as we don't have it. Could simply be blank. It depends what the type is. Is it a string? Then it's blank. And where different kinds of business process comes in is it may be something like, we have a new requirement because of whatever that we have to get, like I said, your passport ID. Well, now you have objects, data that are in different states. One is completely up to date and valid. The other one is we haven't collected that information yet. And so the next time the person logs in, you take them through a process that collects that information. And over time, most people are then converted. And then at some point you have to, right, this is what another form of migration. But again, it's totally all, like, you can tell, like, do we put people through this process? Do we force everybody to go through this process? Do we contact everybody to have them go through the process? Do at some point we say, this is just the way it is and it goes on forever? Again, totally a business decision. The way I think about null architecturally is the only place nulls can exist are in the edges, in DTOs, maybe in database objects. I'll leave in there. I'm reluctant to use them. But once you get a domain object, there shouldn't be nulls anywhere. Yes, and replacing a null check with an optional is present is not, it's not the right way to do things. All right. let's commit. Sex proof in terms of an so I don't think I'd use the terminology up to date. I think what I'd probably say is has this information, and then there's some process, there's some new part of the system as part of this migration. You might have to implement code. This is very this is to me it's very similar to feature flags. You're putting in a bunch of code that may not be used all the time. That it depends on context. But instead of sort of putting something in to turn it on, here we're sort of putting something in to transform it from one state to another. You've basically got two, domain objects that are either has valid passport and does not yet have valid passport. And then that will affect some other process, like post login. You might say, hey, we need your passport, and takes you through that process. But the place I do null checks is at the edge. It's the same place I do validation, at the edge. All right, so I set up, basically I treat the inside of my hexagon as no nulls allowed. Because if I get a null from an API, nope, not allowed. Unless that null comes in because it's implied to say don't change the state of this thing, like if you're doing a put. But that's an API question. At no point do I want nulls in my domain. So validation happens at the outer edge. Because once you get into your application layer, you're now working in domain objects, value objects, entities, aggregates. And so that's another reason to transform these things is you validate your incoming request. And from that, you create value objects. And as part of creating those value objects, you're doing that validation. And then that becomes domain objects and you don't have any nulls anymore. All right. I think that's it for this. So passport ID has a type, right? It's likely going to have not just an ID, but things like what is the country of this passport, and then some identifier. So it's an object. You can have what I would consider sort of an empty or blank version of that, and this is the null object pattern. And so you basically create an instance that is the invalid passport instance. And so it's going to have some special value in there, and so part of that object might be, have we validated this thing? Or is it not, or is it empty? Right? So even that little, what seems like a single field becomes this rich object of a little state machine, right? It's not been entered yet. Entered but not validated, and then validated. And that's all in that passport object. And so then you can represent it for everybody who hasn't entered it yet as a passport object where has not been entered yet. And so your database repository adapter is responsible for translating however you decide to store that in the database to a domain object, which is a passport, and the instance is not yet entered. And then when the person answers it, it's now entered but not validated. And then eventually it gets validated. So there's always a way to represent well, nothing's ever always, but more often than you might think is you have to figure out what does it mean for this to be null? What does that mean? And then you create an object that is in that state. All right. So we are now in event sourcing of our game. So we've got game created and player joined being handled. So what's next? So let's bounce out to the lobby. And by the way, speaking of lobby, I looked at wanted to grab the music for it, except that it's not clear if it's still under copyright. So I don't want to get a copyright strike. So I'm not going to have the music play until I get a little bit more clarification about whether the whether that song with the little cartoon is copyrighted or not. It appears to still be copyrighted, but it's a bit unclear. Okay, so in our lobby, what have we got? We've got show lobby, which shows the name and game views. And so, right. So now we should be able to go to at least one of our disabled tests, which is this one. So if we try to run this, can we run it directly even though it's disabled? Yes. Cool. So what we're saying is if we host a game, we should be able to get new game with handled is created upon host new game. Yeah. Hey, Sweegie. So let's re-enable that. And so we're currently doing is we're faking it by storing the game views here. What we'd like to do is actually pull those from the game repository. We got our GameView loader. That doesn't do anything. Oh, right. Okay. So we don't have, let me add that back. We don't have persistence for our game. We added event sourcing, but we actually didn't save that information anywhere. So let's go do that. Let's go update Jira. So we're not actually done with our persistence. So what we want, oh, I forgot to turn Cody back on. I'll do that in a second. So we need load from repository. Which will require us to so we need the repository port, the repository adapter, and then the JBC concrete adapter. Not adapter, concrete implementation. I think, though, for now, we can just have a port. So this is, oops. This is for the real database. This is in-memory persistence. Thank you for your name generation skills, Astrid. Okay, so let's start there, because once we have that, right, because once we have that, then we can move on. And then once we have that, then we can have doing that. Yeah, except if you redeem those points, I have to name it exactly that in my code. So choose wisely. Okay, so let's put that aside. We're going to put the lobby aside. Don't need that. Don't need that. So we're doing this. What do I want to do next? Actually, I can't work at this level yet because I don't have a person repository. Even though there's not much there, I still don't have a repository for that. So if we go here, I think this is what we'll do. So what we want is, if we create a game, we should be able to find it in the repository. I think that's what we want. So let's do that. So that one, not just yet. So this one is, I think that's what we want. This is basically, we're doing this because we actually are trying to get this to work. And the only way this is going to work is if we've got repositories. So I am doing a bit of not quite outside in. Sort of middle in. Because it's at the level of the application service. I mean, it's basically because this other test is disabled. So I think that's what's triggering this one. So I think that's fine. Is this going to be disabled? No, because it, well, Can I do it without introducing repository yet? No, so this is very much more like a command in CQRS. Game Creator has basically a method to just say create new game. I don't know that this use case, I don't know if there's anything else to this use case. In which case, then I'm not going to disable it because there's nothing else to do other than create the repository. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, Game Creator holding onto the state directly temporarily. But if the only way I can observe what it did is by looking at what's it going to do, it does need the separate object. I mean, I could do output tracker, but that doesn't get me to where I want to go. Right, and that's why I was thinking, like, if I add a method here that's, you know, find game by ID or find game by handle, that's a different use case. So I wonder if that means I want to start somewhere else. Because so I could write this test, right, which basically says, you know, create game, and then is game in repo. Well, how do I determine if the game is in the repo? Do I do a find by game ID or by handle? I don't know what I need yet. Whereas if I, and so basically I'd be defining the repository's API in a test. Now the test does give me some sense of it, but I like to have those I'd like to have that interface be defined by what the application needs. So the question is what part of the code needs to find games? And then I can go the other way around, is in a test, directly put stuff into the repository. and then convert those into game views and then have it. Like, I feel like adding on this game view loader thing which is fairly Yagni. And I think I want to not do that. Yeah, I mean, essentially I'm creating an in-memory version of the repository as my fake. Yeah, I think I'm with Suiji on this. Like, probably just where his game is in repo. I can always add on other things as needed. So let's do that. So we want to create the game via the game creator and then see if the game is in the repo. So let's do that. So basically, game creator, create. When we do create new game, this returns a game. And when we want to look in the repo, aha, okay. We can't find things in the repo. Well, I guess if we do a find all, then it doesn't matter. So now what we want to do is we want to ask a game repository. So we'll say game repository. Now the name on this is going to be I've been struggling with the naming on repository stuff because in Spring, whether it's JDBC or JPA or whatever, the Spring data stuff, they call the technical implementations repository. Now I don't have to call my implementation of that repository. Is it game loader? It's also going to do a save, so it's not just a loader. Now I remember what I was going to use. This is the GameStore, because it's storing event-driven stuff. Hey there, Singularitarian. So we're going to create a GameStore. Oops. And we'll go ahead and create that class. Where is that going to go? This will eventually be a port. So why not put it right there to start? I don't know, you can go and buy games in the store? Yes, stores and storage. And so I'll do that. Yes, grocery store, is that where you store your groceries? That's where I store my groceries. And then we can go ahead and say game store dot assert that actually it's game store find all contains exactly game. That's going to be tricky because the equals is broken. So we can sidestep that for the moment. By extracting, well, let's create this first. No, it's not Boolean. What is find all? We're going to return. I'm fine with a list of game. Yes, that's fine. Let's just check that the name is the same. Not all groceries need to be in the fridge, but we could call it the pantry, the game pantry. I guess that's it. Hold on, I wanted to turn Cody back on. Cody, where are you? There you are. Let's all go to the pantry. Okay, so this will clearly fail. Yeah, this will clearly fail because the game creator is not talking to the game store, but we'll run it anyway. Oops. All right. So game creator, I'm going to rename this one to be create null. And then this one is going to be a create with the game store. The reason why I'm doing that is I want create null to create the repository, basically obtain the repository on its own. So that way the other tests that don't care about directly accessing the store don't have to deal with it. So let's go ahead and create the create method. So that shouldn't change anything. Should still fail with null. And now what we can do is we can pass that along to the constructor. So we will have to create a constructor. No, we're just going to create a new game store and then create the field for that. That should still fail in the same way with null. Yeah, I'm going with nullables for this because I've found that nullables are really there's some aspects of testing without mocks that are not quite compatible with hexagonal testable architecture, but the nullables absolutely are for cases exactly like this. Like most users of Game Creator, at least right now, don't care about the store. Just get it from somewhere. And so this is a nice way of doing that. Is there a way to find out which commands are available in Twitch chat? I don't think so. If by commands you mean the exclamation point commands, no, I'd have to tell you what they are. I have like 50 commands, so I don't think there's any way to get a list of them. Yeah, and so GameStore recently made at least sort of the code base and which is basically the workshop labs freely available. Yeah, help isn't going to help you. So displaying all the commands that are available is not available sort of on purpose, because there might be commands that are only executable by me. Yeah, you get no help. Yeah, and the Java version of the output tracker, I'll be publishing a library for that in the next week. Yeah, so Discord, that command works. That command works. Okay, so this test fails. Why? Because the GameStore doesn't hold on to anything. Instead of that, we could return an empty list to just change the quality of our redness, as it were. And now it's correct. Well, it's not lying even if we switch to dark mode, is that I use the light theme regardless of what my audience thinks. I just triggered dark mode indirectly, didn't I? All right, dark mode. What did we say? Did we like Oceanic? Or do we want something else? See what's going on here. What's going on here? Usually when I select the new theme, it changes this dialogue right away. I don't know. Sometimes I've seen it just not do that. So I think the violet is like, I think the colors is like these accents here. So like if we switch to Oceanic, there's a little, so there's the accents and a little bit of the tint. Storm is a little bluish, and violet is a little bit more darker. All right, we'll go with that. Yeah, it looks like it didn't quite change everything, does it? Doesn't it? Yeah, it's a little broken. Let's see, if we change it back. And then we change it. Yeah, it's not. It's like it's not changing the theme? I don't know. I wonder if they broke that. Because I'm using the 2024.1.2 preview. So I wonder if that's broken. Because I bet if I restart. So let's do a restart. That's not what I meant. See how much trouble dark mode causes? Yeah, that's the way it should look. So I think there's actually a bug. Oh, right, blame me. I'm not the one who redeemed the points. Oh, there's an update. I'll update you later. Okay. Now that we're officially in dark mode, I'll set the timer. Yeah, we've hit our quota of 1 bug report per stream. I think that's a minimum quota. I don't think that's a maximum. Okay, so where were we? The test fails because we're returning an empty list. I'm not going to hard code the return value. I actually want to drive the... Is it really a lie? Was there actually not an update to Cody? No, it says there's an update to Cody and dev containers. What'd they fix? I know they changed... They were trying out the GPT 4. Not 4.0, 4.0. Oh, great. It's on GitHub. All right, never mind. That's too much distraction. Okay. So what we want to do is create... no, not create. Create new game. This should be stored in the database. Maybe you're already up to date. I don't know. Are you on 5.5.9 or 5.5.10? So let's extract this into game. And then GameStore.save game. Wow, that's actually kind of impressive. Because that's exactly what I'd like. We'll create that method. We won't do anything just yet. A404 not found. Jonas redeemed dark mode. So this should still fail in exactly the same way. And I could, go and test directly against the repository, but I don't see the need to do that. So let's go. We'll do a prepare refactor. We'll turn this into games. Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't like you. And we'll return, whoops. I didn't want to initialize that. Actually, instead of empty lists, let's do new array list. Then we'll create a field from this. And we'll field declaration is fine. And we'll make this final. So that should be still the same result. It's an empty list. And now we can do games at game. Now this isn't quite right because this is not using the event sourcing, which is technically wrong, but we'll deal with that later. Creatior. All right. And let me make sure. So that's right. That's done. And yeah, it's good enough for now. So that's that. I think now I can stop faking the lobby. Can I move on now to the lobby test? So we'll create null. It should use then the so now what we want to do is we want to basically have a test that connects lobby to the game creator. And so here's what's interesting about this controller is this controller essentially will end up with at least two dependencies, one for the GameView loader and one for basically creating games. And so the question is do I divide this controller into two pieces? Because this is going to use game creator and this is going to use the GameView loader. So this one is used in this test. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do then is not have this constructor. But instead, do I want to do a create null with a game instead of a game view? Or I get rid of that completely and use the host new game directly. Let's do that. So let's get rid of this create null. And instead what we're going to do is have a create null and then do a host new game. No, I think I need to focus on host new game. So, because host new game is not. So do I want to do host new game? This handle thing is bugging me. That's sort of where I'm getting wrapped around the axle. Let me take a break and then we'll figure out what the next step is. So we'll be back after a short break. All right. So let me switch back to light theme. Sorry. Hang on to your hats, as they say. See, that worked. That changed everything. Interesting. All right, so let's take a step back. What do I want from the front end? Because that is basically driving everything. What I want is to be able to... All right, Jonas, take care. I know it's getting late for y'all. What I want is to host a new game and then see that in the lobby. So the test I can write is host a new game and then check the repository. Because basically, I mean, I could do an output tracker on the game creator, but it's going to have to talk to the repository anyway, so I may as well just do that. So the test then we want is really this one. And then let's drive that. So so we're going to end up with a GameStore. Eventually that's going to get handed in here. And then host new game. This is the new game name. Assert that the game views from the model. So we're not going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is assert that GameStore find all. So for now, I can just extract the name and then check that the name is there. What does find all return? Returns a list of game. Oh, this is not GameView, it's game. Thanks, Cody. Why is it not resolving that? Game. Yeah, I was going to do the has size one first, but why is it not finding game? That was so weird. It was like stuck and it couldn't resolve game. But yeah, let's just do has size of 1. Yeah, the extracting should have worked until Jay got confused. Okay, so this will fail because we're not storing anything. In fact, we don't care about the model, so let's inline that. Actually, since we don't care about the model, we don't care about showing the model. So that's all we need. So we create the game store, use it. We say host new game. We expect that to create one in the game store. Oh, I already did that research. I can tell you who it is. I have the game in my have the name in my notes. I mean, I could probably use it on YouTube anyway. I may or may not get a copyright strike, but I'd rather not risk it. All right, so this will fail because it's going to be empty. And indeed it is. So now, is anybody using this? Yes, okay. Yeah, actually that's what I was going to do. I was going to say, hey, do you mind if I use it on this stream on YouTube? If they want money for it, then I'm not going to do it. But it's possible they might just give the license to me, because I know other people have done that. So let's pass in the game store here. Let us create that constructor. So who's calling this constructor? I think it's just this one. So we'll basically say new game store here and change the signature and then store it. So create node by itself will create its own game store. This one will take a game store and use that. This won't change anything, but it should all still compile, and the test will fail in the same way. And now, instead of calling these two methods, if I delete that, do other tests fail? No. Okay, good. And so now I can call game... No, not game store. Game creator. Dang it. Why is it squiggly? Oh, because Spring is not happy. We'll fix Spring later. That's not what I want. What I want is Blech. Yes, I do not. I have not, because we were starting over, so I don't have the coloring yet. So we don't want GameStore. Blech. So we don't want that. Instead, what we want is that, and then change that, and then rename it. Migrate type. All right, so we've got create null, which does the right thing. We've got create with a game creator. That variable's wrong. All right, that shouldn't have changed anything. It should still fail, but it should be the only test failing because it doesn't have size of 1, it has 0. Okay. Now I can call the right thing, which is game creator, create new game. I don't know where it's getting this from. Like, there's no method that takes that. Okay, so we know that game creator create new game does the right thing. So therefore, host new game is now calling game creator when it needs to. And therefore this should now pass. Yeah, it's like I'm fine with giving me suggestions that are compilable. That would not have been compilable. All right, so that passes. Compilability is overrated. Maybe in your neck of the woods. All right. So now we can host new games. They're stored. I don't know that I want this. I think what I want is so what test is using this is this test. So now I think I'd like to have the lobby now be able to retrieve game views. So here's a case where I could create a game store, store a game in it, and then pass that to the create null, or I could just do create null of a game instead of a game view. Let's do that. Ah, interesting. So the constructor takes either no parameters or a list of game events. I do not have a... Oh, do I have a crate factory? I do have a crate, yes. Thank you. I forgot that I had that. In fact, that constructor, I don't think should be public. Because the only way you get is reconstitute. So that's what I want. Stop it. Yeah, so what's interesting about nullables is nullables in the testable, in the CQR hex architecture can, not just can, but really should only exist in the application layer. Oh yeah, let's do shiny Chrome. And so what I'd like is the one that used to take create GameView. That's interesting that it thinks I want that one. I don't want that one anymore. I just want that. Do I not have a conversion method for GameView? I do not. So let's go create one. That's fascinating. Where the heck did it get that from? I mean, I can guess where it got it from. So clearly Cody is scanning projects that are open, because I got my blackjack open, and that's the only place in any of my code that has the term shoe. Fascinating. All right, so what does GameView take? It takes the name, so you got that wrong right away. It's game, not get name. Oh, come on, you can't even do the right method. This name. And this one is just totally wrong. So this is just game.handle. Player count. 1? No, let's do 0, because that's valid. And then let's... Oh, should we just actually... What are we doing? We should ask the players.size. And then let's take this. This is the first time I'm translating it, as far as I know. So... And we'll move this to game. Oh, did I just remove it? Thank you. Like as soon as I hit the button, I'm like, that's not where I want it to go. Game view. Right. That's still kind of cheating. So actually, that's not what I want to do. what I want is a game store. And hold on to that. And then I want to save the game, and that's what I want to pass into that. But I need a game creator. Yeah, that. So I didn't want that there because I want to stop storing these game views. All right, so let's get rid of this constructor. And we'll get rid of this in a bit. Yes, that's fine. Okay. This test should now fail because we're not going to get this game view. In fact, we're not going to get any game views. Right. So let's actually get game views. This is the only reference, right? Yeah, so let's inline the field and remove it. That's a fascinating so this should actually be game store. Oh, so now I do need something that is not the game store. Well, I guess I could use the game store. I don't have access to the game store. I guess maybe I need to save access to the game store. Eventually this will be the game loader. Yeah, I think I want to construct that takes a game store where I don't need access to the game creator. And it just does the right thing. And so then this does a create like that. But no, what I actually want, I don't want this. So let's inline that. Because what I want is to pass in, right now I need lobby to hold on to both, even though the game store is not going to be held on to this for much longer. So I need this create to pass in game store and that thing. And this one, this one has to create a game store like this one. And then That's basically that. Oh, no, I do need the variable. Oh, I didn't change the constructor. Let's go change the constructor. And we'll create a field for that. And I think we can make this final. This is spring errors. So create, if we just get a game store, passes that along and wraps it with a game creator. Create null basically does both. So we can actually replace that with create that makes game store. This one I need the game store so I can save it. But then I can call again the create game store because I don't need the game creator here, right? Hexproof asks, how did I get the knowledge I have today? Yeah, working on projects. Reading, working on projects, learning what I need. That's why I always recommend the best way to learn is work on projects. Starting with simple ones and then starting to get more complex where you start needing databases and front ends and adding features to existing code bases. So the purpose of create null is basically asking Lobby, hey, can you give me one where I'm not going to give you any of the dependencies and you just create them on your own? And yes, always, always looking for ways to improve, which requires being aware of, wow, this is awkward. How can I make this better? And for me, a lot of that comes from, wow, this is kind of hard to test. How can I make this easier to test? All right, so create null will create everything for us. We'll create the game store, which then eventually creates the game creator. Create null, if we give it a game, basically we're saying, give me a lobby where there's already a game. I don't know where it goes. You figure it out. So the idea is whereas I used to encapsulate some of this, what I consider sort of test setup stuff in my test classes, James Shore talks a lot about why this is better to put this in your production code, because then when you refactor, it basically does two things. It sort of shields you from having to then refactor a bunch of tests, but it also means that if you change, oh, I don't use GameStore in this way, I store it in a different way, the callers don't care about it. Do I like the null object pattern? Yes. What's not to like about it? There's nothing not to like about it. It is a well-used, well-known pattern. So there are two different things. There's null object pattern, which we talked about before, with like the passport thing. This is Nullables, which is perhaps not the best name, and James Shore admits this, but James Shore talks about it in his testing without mocks stuff. Yeah, and so null object pattern really encourages you to think, what does it mean to be null? Because just putting null, what happens when it's null? How do you treat it? You probably have some if statements somewhere. If it's null, you do something. Well, make that part of the object itself instead of putting that everywhere. So it's really another form of encapsulation. All right, so now that I have the game store, now I can ask game store. It's a little odd to meter. Not quite a violation because I'm getting a collection and so it's fine, but this is a little awkward, but that's fine because this is going to go away. So now we should get the lobby. In other words, the lobby with games. This will then fail because that's not what we have in our crate game. So what we're doing here is we're going from one red, hopefully, to a different red. And now we're at a different red. So now we're getting basically, there are no game views. Which of course makes sense. And that's not what I predicted. Because what I predicted was we're going to get a game view, but it's going to have these values. Sorry, it's not going to have these values. Now I'm expecting, so my prediction was wrong. So let's make a note of that. Because I forgot and did not notice this new array list. I noticed it before and then I forgot about it, and now I need to do the right thing. So here what we want is GameStore find all. Let's hold on to that as a variable. And this is all games. To a certain extent, there's no point in putting this attribute in if the games are empty. So I'm going to turn this back into an if statement. And then move this up. So now what I don't want all games. I want all games transformed into GameView from to list. And then this will extract back out as game views. Right. So that now I should have one game view in there. It'll be game name, Shiny Chrome 12, and since we didn't add players, that should be 0. I guess I could change my test to say that. So how would we change the test to say that? Game name, Shiny Chrome 12, and this should be 0. Voila. So xproof says passport example. What is an empty constructor to represent an empty passport? I probably, to make it more clear, I would have it perhaps a named constructor that creates, you know, however you want to call and refer to the passport that's not filled in yet. So maybe create passport.createEmpty. And then it would be very optional, like you could do that, although I'd probably more I'd be very careful with that, because I'd probably, if it only has 2 states that it's basically empty or not empty, like you're not doing anything else with it, then I might be okay with a Boolean for saying is empty. In my experience, Booleans often turn into 3 or more states, and then you'll want an enum. So I honestly would not leave it as a Boolean. I would just go directly to have an enum with 2 states. Empty and not empty, or filled in, or valid. because what that makes easier is at some point you're going to likely be making a decision based on that, and it's then you can use Java's switch expressions and closed switch and stuff like that. That makes it really nice. All right, so let's commit. Lobby now. Yeah, and partition, you don't want to partition into a map that's Boolean. That's just terrible. Because eventually, because what's nice is if you do things like partition, you have two states now. When you have three, you're not going to have to change very much code. I mean, I've gotten to the point where Booleans are suspicious. That having very clear enums representing what really is, because almost always Booleans are state in the sense of a state machine, and you may as well make that clear up front, even if it only ever has two. You can always write query methods that make that simple to have is this and is that, but so frequently it turns out either going to want to add another state, or it's not clear sort of what does false mean. All right. What next? Yeah, I think it's related to a missing abstraction. It feels more like yeah, maybe it's missing abstraction. That Boolean, you're relying on the name of the variable and the name of any methods that return that Boolean to sort of hold and support that abstraction. Pulling it out into an enum that makes it really clear, that's your abstraction. Yeah. So I don't know that I want to do any refactoring here just yet. I think what I would like to do is move this into a from that takes a list of games. And then I can inline this. That's better. Yeah, absolutely. Then you if you saying, this thing is called empty and this thing is called valid, you're not going to get confused. It's really kind of amazing when you start really looking at Booleans in that way, how very few are actually like, is this a true or false? That false doesn't mean this thing is not true. It usually means just this other thing. From a domain standpoint. All right, so what next? We didn't quite do that. Or did we? Actually, we did. Although we supply the handle. Yeah, we didn't actually test that yet. Do we need to test that from here? Actually, no. This is good enough. We could convert this into output tracker, but again, it's like, I don't know, that feels like overhead I don't need. So I don't think I need to test this. Let's really test to make sure test to make sure host new game. Because the fact that the handle is generated, that is a test at a lower level. Now, show lobby. Well, it certainly provides the game views that has that information. Does it actually show it? It should. I think we now have to fix the fact that this constructor is not right. So, oh, I don't need that. So we need a GameStore. Oh, is that what I meant? Maybe. Yeah, I think I have to do that as a redirect attribute. Because you click on the host game button, the post can't return that information unless it's HTMX, but we're not doing HTMX for this part. So I'd probably want something here. Let's see. So I type in the name, I click a button. What do I want to see? I mean, I could just, for now, it'll just display here and that's good enough. If somehow there are a lot of games that I might be confused about the game I just hosted, then I might redirect to a separate page. But I think this is fine for now. Yeah. I mean, I could do a redirect attribute if you've just created X game. Yeah. All right, Astrid, have a good night. So we are showing handles because that's what we're showing. So let's go and change our configuration to get this to work. Unlike what I've done in the past, I'm going to basically make a new class. which is going to be config for now. And make this a component. And then what we'd like is actually, I don't want Spring calling that constructor. I want it calling oh, no, that's fine. All right, so we'll create a bean. That's fine. Thank you. That's actually fine too. That was nifty. It created exactly the beans I needed, and did it in the right way. Right? My game store is very simple. Yeah, that was nice. Okay, so now I should be able to run all the tests, and assuming I did the configuration right, everything should run fine. Whoop, or not. Right, because I need a test configuration for this. I think that's fine. I think we can basically why did I make this a component instead of configuration? Because I wasn't thinking. So that'll still fail because this is in a separate class, it won't automatically get loaded, unlike if I put it in the Spring Boot application startup. So that's fine. What we can say on our test is not test configuration. We want like import. And then it's TDD game config. I think that's right. Yeah. And then if we ever want to override it, then we can create our own configuration and import that here. Why is it warning me about all these? I'm going to just say suppress for tests. All right. So all tests pass. Right, and now we can run the app. Right? You opened it in the wrong place. Yeah, so again, like what? Why does it not log me in? Is it a cookie? It is a cookie. So I've got a session ID. What are all these values? I forgot that that's something I'm gonna do is I don't know why it doesn't think I'm logged. Why does it think I'm logged in is really the issue. Okay. Oh, I know why. There's something about clearing session IDs or something like that that I'll have to look into. All right. All right, so let's host a game. And there it is. It's interesting that we got 0 here. So Old Fox 0, Tricky Bird 94, both have 0 players. So that's all working great. All right. So that works. So what's next? That's done. So now we're up to join game. So once we finish join game from the UI, which is our inbound HTTP adapter, then we'll have sort of caught up with what we did inside the domain, and then we'll do this, although we probably won't get to this today. So this is done. So we need a text box that's going to say which game would you like to join. I'm going to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll do that. So I'll be right back. All right. So the next step is I'd like this to be displayed a little nicer, even though it doesn't really matter. Mainly because it was a little hard to read. I'm curious if I can get Cody to do something with this. So let's see. Whoa, what's up with the coloring? I think that's still an IntelliJ bug. I don't want to explain code. Let's see. All right, that was a good start. I wish it'd be replace it cursor. That would be nice. I don't think I want these as line. Do I want these as line items? That's okay for now. Because what I want is for this to say that. And this to say, I want this in a different style. Font family, font, no, font family. Give me a monospaced. What does that look like? Yeah, that's good. Actually, I'm going to pull this out. That way I can preview it. All right, and so what I want is, I guess I want another form. I guess this is join. Is it join or is it games join? I think this is just join, because this will be as the result of an invite. So I will send somebody an invite link, and they'll just enter that or just directly go to that link. Well, the link will be a GET request that will redirect to something else. We'll just start here. So what I want with join, is we want, this one is text. And so this is game handle. Is that it? They'll already be logged in, so we'll know who they are. I think that's what we want. Yeah. So let's preview that. That looks, so that's host new game. Why is the label wrong? It should be like that. Yeah. All right. So that will do a post to that endpoint. So this will be a new controller. Well, it's still part of the lobby. But it's certainly a new endpoint. All right, so we need a new endpoint. And then that does that. Yep. So XProof asks, is the definition of domain and domain-driven design the subject, just the subject area of the problem you're trying to solve? Yes. Note that it's the problem area, not the solution area. So what is the problem? So problem sometimes causes confusion. So I usually call it either what's the problem or the need that you have to fill. All right, so let's go, let's commit. And let's go and create another lobby MVC test. This one is going to be post to join game. So where does it redirect to? Should redirect you to the game. XProof, does everything have a domain? Yes, otherwise what are you doing? Otherwise you're just, I don't know what you'd be doing if you're writing code that doesn't solve a problem. It may not be a complex domain. Not all domains are complex, but you're writing code for some purpose. So what is that purpose? Right? Even a game has a domain, has a purpose. I mean, one could say, you know, if you're doing like leet code and you're solving individual little problems, then that's your domain, but there's not much of a domain there. But there is, like, you know, I mean, those are too small to be considered sort of a full-on domain in domain-driven design. Boomerang, yes. Code can create problems. So you might write, but then that's your domain is problem creation. So let's see, is this what we want? So lobby, join game, not quite. Is join under lobby? I don't think so. Your parameter is completely wrong. But it will be the redirection, and we don't know where it's going to redirect to at this point, so we don't care. All right. So this test will certainly fail. And it does, so let's go create it. Aw, I'm disappointed, Cody. No, don't you remember? I had join over there. How quickly they forget. Yes, we will join game with the principal, and we will have a request param that is game handle. Correct. We'll just redirect here, because I don't know what the URL is going to be of the game just yet. Yeah, BDSL. I have no idea why it thought that. I was expecting it to have a little bit of context of like, I just wrote a test that does a post, so why didn't you write me a post? And then it forgot what the URL was and just hallucinated again what it thought it should be. But the rest was useful. All right, so this will now pass. And it does. So I'll go ahead and do a commit. Okay, so that's done. And so for now, what we need to do, oh, before I forget, let's see if I can I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do here. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to do this offline. I was hoping to was a simple thing that I forgot, but this looks fine. Um, yeah, I don't know why it's not logging me out. Okay. So let's move on. Um, so we want our lobby test. This one is that's interesting. That's way too much. But some of that's useful. I don't need that. I don't need that. And then I can do that. And I can probably inline that. I don't know where it got some of those words. It's so funny. Like code, I can figure out where it gets that from, but like some of the text, it's just interesting. All right, so we've got a lobby with a game already created. Now we want to join, so we want to say lobby. In this case, we don't want dummy principal. We actually want some actual principal. Because what we're gonna do for now, pretty soon we're gonna want to create a person repository, but right now we'll throw in temporary person ID. That's gonna be fun. The question is, where do we redirect to? That's going to be the trick. But that's a separate question. So we joined the game, and so now we should be able to principal, the interface doesn't have a lot in it in terms of things that you have to implement. So yeah, so the basic principle from, and this is Java security, not even Spring, just has a name. There's more sophisticated method interfaces, authenticated principal, that has a lot more information, and we'll eventually switch to that. But for now, this is all we want. Really, what I should be doing is not using principal, but eventually what I'll use is person, the actual object I want, and then provide a method, a lookup method that Spring will use to convert whatever comes in into that thing. And so this will likely be an identifier or something like that. I mean, I guess it's serves mostly as a marker, but it really is the base class or base interface for a whole bunch of things in the principal area. As you can see, all the yeah, all the stuff. It's like authentication is really the token that we want to work with. I've just been using whatever the simplest possible thing is. So this works because it's what we call a SAM, single abstract method. So the interface has a method. That method is getName. And that's the only method that's undefined, right? The only method that's abstract. And so therefore the Lambda says implement, I mean, this is what it looks like as the anonymous inner class. So because this is the only method that's abstract, then the Lambda does that. So it's sort of the magic of what Lambdas mean underneath. So in a sense, this is the implementation, or not in a sense, literally, this is the implementation of getName. Yeah, I don't think they call them SAM anymore. I think they call them functional interfaces, but really principal is not, is it technically a functional interface? No, because it's not marked as a functional interface. It just happens to be one. But there are specific interfaces that are more meant for functional stuff. Right. So it's basically like whatever method you're implementing here, I'm going to return whatever value you give it. And I could write more complex code. Like I could say return blue. And that's valid. But then there's shorthands, which is like, well, we don't need return because we know whatever thing you give it here is a return. So we can just say, get rid of that. Yeah, as an old school Java developer for quite a while, I had to do this to see what is it doing, because I'm used to anonymous inner classes. This is basically an anonymous inner class. I just have looked at like, what is it doing? Now I've gotten used to it. Yeah, it's kind of a weird side effect if your interface happens to have one method. It means that it's easy to lambdaify. So what we expect is if we join a game, we probably want to pull this game out and hold on to it. We expect that game player players let's just say hot size of 1. In which case we may not even need this principle, but we could start with that, and then we can say extracting players then extracting from that. Why does it not like this? That's returning a list. Why is it not happy? I've seen this before. It's a function extractor. Something's not quite right here. Um, am I wrong? Can I not do... I am confused. Because I can say players. And then I can say contains exactly blue. So the other one... Yeah, that wasn't working either. Unless it's... Oh, because I've already got players. Oh, duh. I'm extracting on players. That's the problem. What I want to extract is... That's why it wasn't working, because it's game... It's not game.player name, it's player name. I don't know why I think it's game.player. Although technically it's... Is it player? It's players. Player does not have the name. So I have no idea what this is going to be. Ah, crud. I guess I can get the ID, and I can say the ID. I don't know what the ID would be. I can predict what it might be. Zero. So it was correct in complaining about that. I just, because I guess because I was calling game players, I forgot that I was doing that. All right. BDSL, building is wrong in that regard. There's an at functional. I mean, the way I'd have to go look at the Java language spec, but I believe the spec is saying there are specific interfaces that are functional. There's sort of implied functional, and then there's marked as functional, and they are treated slightly differently. All right, so this is, well, this will certainly fail because we're not doing anything with the game. Yeah. I'm just gonna say 99 here. So what I wanted to say also was has size of 1 is actually all I initially care about. And interestingly, has size IntelliJ can't figure out what it is, what the return value of that is. That's interesting. All right, so now let's now we need the other thing, because what we want is we want the player joins player joins game thingy. And on that, we want to say join. We'll have to make up some new person. With some new person ID. Now it takes a game. Do I want it to also support taking a game handle? That would be convenient. So I think I'd like that. Yeah, method chains, like, help me out, IntelliJ. Yes, if you have an interface that had one abstract method and people were using lambdas to implement it, you add a second abstract method, you can no longer use lambda. Yep, you would break any code that did that. And I believe that's why you want to mark things as with @functional. Because basically it forces you, and you will break your code if you add a method that breaks it as a functional interface. So just because you happen to have one method, yes, you can use it as a functional interface. But that class is basically saying it makes no guarantees that it will remain so. So we can look at the Java language spec 9649. What was it? 9649. Yes, I like to read language specs. 9649. So there you go. So it facilitates early detection of inappropriate method declarations. And so therefore it's compile time error if you mark it with functional interface, but it turns out that it's actually not. So if you really mean it to be a functional interface, annotate it to protect yourself against future changes. If you want it to be always functional, then yes, absolutely annotate them. All right. Well, if you try to add a second abstract method onto one that had a single one, you will get, if you annotate it with @functional interface, it will immediately fail to compile. If you did not mark it as @functional interface, then any code that tries to implement it with a lambda will fail to compile. If you're a library and you add a method, like if somebody went into principal and added another one, it might break a whole bunch of code. But to a certain extent, that's on you for using it and assuming it was a functional interface. Yep. absolutely. You could change it, not realizing people are using it as such. And we know who's at fault, as it's always the library author. Don't do that. Spacebar heaters. So I want a game handle. So I'm gonna have to I can't currently find I think I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to disable this test because I can't implement this in one step. I mean, I could basically find all and do that, but that doesn't really prove anything. So let's disable this. And we'll create a method that does nothing, and we'll stop here. And we'll commit and push. And that's all, folks. So next time, which will likely be Friday, we'll pick it up from here. As always, you can join the Discord to discuss this or anything related to the stuff we do here on stream. We are starting the conversation, or continuing the conversation, for selecting the next book for our book club. So don't forget to ask about that if you're not already a member. And what else? I think that's it. So thanks for hanging out. Appreciate it. Always appreciate recommendations for folks to come on and stop by. And have a great rest of whatever day is left for you. And I will see you next time. Bye.